Mordecai, you have a few minutes just to tell us who you are.
Yeah, hi everyone. As Stephen said, my name is Mordecai Ogada, and I'm based in Kenya. My background is that I'm a wildlife ecologist by training, and I've been involved in the conservation field for the last about 19 years in Kenya and other parts of Africa and some parts of the US as well. As I said, my background is in carnivore ecology, but I've been working a lot with human dimensions and human-wildlife conflict, and that's sort of gotten me into a lot of the human issues that influence conservation, and later on some of the conservation issues that influence human livelihoods, and that's sort of what brought me professionally to where we are now. I'm a co-author of a book, The Big Conservation Lie, which talks about lots of the policy and human problems and legal issues and ethical issues with conservation in Africa, that some of which happen in other parts of the world as well. And that has brought me into discussions over these things and more into the policy world. So I'm not very much of an ecologist anymore, and I practice that mainly through some students. But I'm more involved in policy and advocacy for indigenous and local people's rights, wherever conservation is being practiced in Africa, because there's a lot that needs to change. We are moving a little bit in the right direction, but there's still a lot that needs to change before conservation practice in Kenya and other parts of Africa becomes a practice that is just and fair to the people who live with and amongst the wildlife.
Great, thank you. Can people hear me now? We will now move into this little role play, and the little game is that I'm an African conservationist, but my parents were born in Kenya 100 years ago or so, and I've got a Kenya passport. So sometimes, in some contexts, I say I'm an African, and in others I don't, of course. Now, I've had a few beers, as they do, so I'm speaking very frankly, probably more frankly than I would actually to an indigenous Kenyan. But let me assure you that everything I say is real. It's all things we've heard over and over again, both in Kenya and elsewhere. So it's a kind of light-hearted look at a serious subject. And Mordecai will play himself, of course. Now, this little play is unrehearsed. I've thought of my script, but Mordecai doesn't know what it is. I'm now going to move into my role. That'll take me 10 seconds. Hi man, Jumbo, habari. How's it going, man?
It's going fine, thank you.
Good. Now listen, seriously, if it wasn't for Western conservation NGOs, all the elephants and rhinos would be extinct. Africans, they just don't appreciate nature. Unchecked, they'd have killed all the wildlife long ago. What do you say to that?
I don't think that would be true, because these animals have lived long with us long before any of the Western conservation structures were brought in here. And the fact is, the feeling that you people have that we don't appreciate wildlife is basically because we do not perceive it in the same way you people do. Our heritage is very much a part of us, so we appreciate it and we value it, even though it does not look like it excites us too much, but it is very much part of who we are. We have names that are taken from wild animals, wild plants, birds, etc., etc. But we value it for what it is. We revere these animals. Some of them are our totems as well. We revere these animals, but we just do not see them as something to be consumed in terms of sport hunting. We will not kill anything that we don't eat. We will not kill anything for fun. And what we do utilize is utilized sustainably, because our livelihoods depend on it. So we can't kill them all and commercialize it. So I think it's just that our perception is different, and people who came from other parts of the world haven't really bothered to try and see things from our perspective. They are trying very hard to impose their perspective on us. So we should be excited about maybe having leopard skin straps around our hats, etc.
Okay, but listen. The locals, they might once have lived like that. They might once have lived in harmony with nature and all that stuff. But now they just want to live like the rest of us, with cars and big houses, and they poach to get money, man.
Oh, well, the incoming of Western sort of consumption patterns is a reality, and obviously the way we live is not the way our ancestors lived a couple of hundred years ago. But it does not in any way diminish the fact that we still value our heritage, and we are people in Africa. We are some of the few societies in the world today that still live where we originated from. So we have that attachment to the land, to the features and everything, because we haven't immigrated anywhere. So it's very much a part of us. As much as our livelihoods do take a toll on our environment, like everyone else in the world, our footprint, I think, is much lighter than what you find in the Western world, our carbon footprint. And I think there are ways human behavior can be changed, and there are ways in which we can make our livelihoods more sustainable as life goes, as the years go on. But we are very much against being removed from places and part of our heritage to make room for recreation, which is in the form of tourism or sport hunting, or make room for wildlife that we've always actually lived with.
Okay. But hang on here. I mean, everybody knows that Africans are corrupt. You can't trust them. If the West stopped funding conservation, everything would collapse overnight.
Well, I think the funding that comes in for conservation is probably the major root of the problems we have. There's so much money to be made in keeping and exploiting something that has always been there, something that we didn't create and all that. And that is what creates a problem. Globalization, it's part of globalization, I think, or probably the beginning of globalization, if we can say so. Very little of African sculpture or trinkets or anything is actually made of ivory from elephants. There is nothing in any African culture that is made from rhino horn, for example. And these are all global. So even poaching itself, the commercial poaching itself, is very much a global influence, because otherwise we didn't have resources to waste and endanger ourselves killing animals that we didn't need to kill to defend ourselves or to eat. So I think the corruption is just the term that is used for exploitation by locals. When it's exploitation by outsiders, it's given other terms, like poaching becomes hunting, or culling. Bush meat becomes game meat, and fur coats become trophies, etc., etc. So I think it's just a question of perspective, and I think our role in keeping this stuff alive is not well acknowledged.
Okay. But look, we all know there are just too many Africans. They breed like rabbits. The problem is overpopulation.
That again is a very, very popular line, especially one that has been pursued for many years, starting from the Duke of Edinburgh, down to his grandson. So the fact is, if we look at absolute figures, Africa is more sparsely populated than Europe or Asia, and the fact is, the absolute numbers of people in Africa are far from being a problem for our environment. More so because of the very light footprint of the people. They're like, for example, the Maasai people and many other indigenous ethnic groups live life in a manner that has very low impact on the environment, especially since they need it for grazing their animals. They need to get wood fuel from the environment, etc. So it's the behavior. That's a big mistake that many Westerners make. They're looking at human numbers instead of human behavior. The average Western family of 5 will have a carbon footprint of a few hundred Maasai tribesmen in Kenya. And that's what we need to look at, because that's where the impact on the environment and the biosphere really is. It's not in numbers, far from it.
Okay. Now, this survival campaign here, they could keep talking about how the local people are evicted, but we all know that's just past history. Nowadays, conservationists work in partnership with them.
Yeah, the evictions, many happened in the past, but the trophies of, or the rewards of those evictions and injustices are still with us today. I mean, in the national parks, we still have and are very proud and boast about the national parks that were created by killings or evictions or violence. And I think we need to look closely at what a national park should be, or a protected area should be, because this is becoming an unseemly way of conserving wildlife that is really targeted at the tropics. And so we need to partner, but the form of partnership we have now is very inequitable, in that it's an outsider comes in as a sort of patron, or sort of almost like a paternal figure, who uses money and hands it out to buy allegiance, and thereby interferes with indigenous livelihoods by calling them unsustainable, when the main aim of removing livestock from a given place, for example, is not to protect the elephants. It's to please the tourists who have been sold a product, who have been sold an image of Africa as wilderness, empty, pristine wilderness without human presence. A product which actually is completely false, because Africa is known to be the cradle of mankind. So human beings have been on these plains for hundreds of thousands of years. So in 2020, it's a kind of fallacy to say that we want empty spaces for conservation.
Okay. So now this survival campaign thing, it's just too aggressive, isn't it? That's not the way. I mean, it alienates the conservationists, and we all want the same thing in the end. They want the same thing as you do, don't they?
Yeah, I don't think it's aggressive, because okay, the way conservation practice is being imposed in Kenya and other parts of Africa now is pretty aggressive. There's millions of dollars coming in. There's guns, uniforms, planes, ammunition, fences, etc. That is all slow burning violence. So it does have to be met pretty forcefully by pointing out the ethical problems. And we don't all want the same thing as these conservationists. These conservationists, many of them actually want pristine playgrounds, a little piece of Africa. They want the romantic old Africa of Teddy Roosevelt's safari in 1919 or 1909, I think. So we don't, and we, the local people, we simply want a livelihood and the right to live within our heritage and enjoy our heritage and utilize it as we see fit, as its owners and custodians. So I think a certain level of aggression is required, because the situation we are in now was not achieved by kindness. It was achieved by some level of aggression that is still ongoing. So we need to show some aggression in order to come to the table so we can have the peaceful talk, I think.
Good. Okay. Asante sana, Mordecai. Now, wait a minute, I'm going out of character now.
All right.
I've got to change my, got to get rid of my Tusker there. Good, excellent. So we have time for some questions from any other participant. So if you want to ask Mordecai a question, you stick up your electronic hand and I notice it. Or I think everybody notices it. Anyway, do that. And I'm looking to see whether anybody has. Nobody has. Everybody's happy. Ah, wait a minute. Sarah has a question for, yeah, Sarah. Sarah, you've gone. Sarah? I don't know what's happened to Sarah.
She has an issue with the microphone.
Oh, she has an issue with her microphone.
Yes, but she's there. Maybe you can type your question.
Yeah, okay. If you type a question, Theo, can you get typed questions from Slack? If anybody's got a question they want to type, send it to Theo on Slack. Hang on, Fiona's now got her hand up. Fiona, can you put your microphone on?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for that, and really interesting to hear from you, Mordecai. My question is about how do you see, in the from what I can see in the indigenous rights movement in East Africa, and for example, we had some Maasai from Tanzania in the office very recently. They're talking about some form of land claim, well, not a claim because it's their land, only they were duped into signing over the Serengeti under the British rule. So I'm just wondering how you see those sorts of cases going through the courts, but also with the indigenous rights movement, whether you think they stand any chance of success and whether this is a route to go down.
Yeah, I think they definitely have a case, and there's a similar sort of what's called the Anglo-Maasai agreement, which moved the Maasai over some vast areas of Kenya, including Laikipia. They certainly have a legal standpoint, a valid legal standpoint. In my view, the actual implementation of and I think this is what's really standing in the way of proper rulings being given in their favor, is that no one really knows how we can implement this. And my personal view is that if we rule on the principle that they have a right to this claim, I think we need to come up with usage agreements. For example, if we're talking about national park like Serengeti, and those people are moved out at the edges, we can come up with, I would not say we degazette Serengeti and subdivide it and give it to people, because many African countries being what they are, I mean, if it were Kenya, the beneficiaries would likely be some very well-connected politicians and very few of the actual villagers. So I think we should come up with usage agreements that let them use the resources in the Serengeti, i.e. grazing, probably water points, and such resources, and maybe grass for thatching and all that. These are very resource-rich areas. So we come up with usage agreements that they can graze in there in the dry season when the grass is low. They can fetch water in there if they need to, and those kind of things. And at the same time, co-manage the environment, don't damage it and by deforestation, etc. So it's about coming up with usage agreements, because a lot of pastoralist communities, it's not really that they want to take the land and own it and take pieces of it for themselves. What they want is usage of the resources. and the ability to keep livestock. And this can also be supplemented by helping them develop the production chain, maybe provide veterinary services, marketing services, etc., just to make the livestock production a profitable thing so that they can have money to do whatever it is they need to do. But avoid handouts, just streamline the chain, but give them a way to make it for themselves.
I have Sarah's question, Stephen.
Yep.
Okay, so Mordi, I'm going to read you Sarah's question because her micro is not working.
She'll be able to hear me, though.
Sorry?
Sarah will be able to hear.
Yes, Sarah is here, but her microphone is not working.
Okay.
What would you say have been the biggest change in this fight against colonial conservation in the last 10 years or so? Anything positive or negative about it?
I think in the last 10 years is that a lot of the conservation programs, part of their sort of sweeteners was giving bursaries or school fees. And it's sort of suddenly after 10 years, there's a group of well-educated young people who now know the questions to ask. So it's sort of poetic justice in that way. So there are a lot of people who are talking. There's a lot more talk, people who know more about their rights and are demanding their rights. The only problem is that the rights are being given by handouts in terms of bursaries, etc., instead of giving them rights to use the resources. So I think it's almost like the conservationists are collecting money from donors in order to get money to bribe these people. That's the problem. The problem is how it's happening. But at least things have changed in the last 10 years, that there are a lot more people able to speak up now. And the advance of telecommunications, smartphones, data, social media has really helped this discussion, move this discussion forward. So the young people are beginning to talk a lot more. You know, in these societies, the elders speak a lot, but the young people don't generally speak. But now the smartphones and social media has sort of changed that around. So the young people are speaking up a lot more, and it's being addressed at national level, at least in Kenya and in Tanzania, I know for sure.
Fio has a question.
Yes, I have a question. I would like, as you know, Mordecai, this is a very difficult campaign for us, and I guess that for you too. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is so difficult? Why is it so difficult to change conservation and to make people change their idea about conservation?
I think it's because of the success of marketing. I mean, if you think about what the problems we are talking about now, this is stuff that has been in famous movies even for the last 50 years. I'm thinking back, Born Free, that must have been 1965, 66 or something. Serengeti Shall Not Die, those kind of movies. It's really romanticized and sold this thing as something that's so good, and it's gotten so much support. So many of the people who give money, people in the West who give money to support these conservation programs, actually are people who mean well, and they think they're doing something good. So it's been sold very well, it's been marketed very well, and it's been successful. That's why it's so difficult right now when you're talking about, especially East Africa, Kenya and Tanzania. It's very hard to speak up against something that's being done in the name of conservation, because they're always the good guys and the poachers are the bad guys, and it's still pushed by media. You see what's on Discovery Channel, National Geographic and all that. It shows that every animal is there trying to make a living, and they're slowly being killed off by these people who want to just kill and eat everything. And I think that's, we really need to change that narrative. So apart from what happens in Kenya, there's a lot that needs to happen in media, in National Geographic, in Hollywood, in Discovery Channel, in order to show that there is another side to the picture. The side to the picture being shown now is the same one that was shown in the 1950s.
Linda, you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mordecai, thank you. I was wondering, what's your response to conservation organizations usually saying that, you know, they're just a civil society organization, they have no influence over these kind of things? What would you say?
Excuse me a moment. I think that's not true, because okay, there are civil society organizations, but some of them have gotten to be really big in terms of widespread around the world, and big in terms of the amount of money they have and the amount of money people are giving them. And I think this has made them almost like parallel governments. The Nature Conservancy, for one, is extremely powerful in East Africa. This is from central to northern Tanzania, central to northern Kenya. They control vast areas, and they've become almost like parallel governments. And they're running grant programs into the tens of millions of dollars. So they're no longer small. In Kenya, actually, the civil society conservation organizations have become bigger in terms of resources and money than Kenya Wildlife Service, which is the state organization. And they are now influencing policy. They call policy discussions, they sponsor policy discussion meetings. And they very much push the agenda. Right now, there's a webinar on Friday on post-COVID-19 conservation challenges, and it's being hosted in Nairobi by a group, the Nature Conservancy, and a number of other civil society organizations. And the minister is going to the meeting. So this is the part of the problem you see. So they have a way of really pushing government policy in the directions they want. So they are no longer small. They're civil society, and another thing, they're now even running armed law enforcement, which itself is a serious legal problem. So they're civil society, yes, but they're no longer small. They've become very big. I think too big, actually.
Thank you. So Johnny has a question.
Mordecai, I was wondering, thinking particularly of East Africa, whether and how you think that the work that you are doing and the work that we are doing is having an impact, and if so, what it is.
I think the impact we are having is there. Okay, there's been a lot of talk for a number of years about the rights of indigenous communities in Kenya, Tanzania, etc. But what has changed recently now, and what is getting effective now, is that we've started pointing fingers at the people who are behind this injustice, these organizations, and people like WWF, the Nature Conservancy, for many years have almost been beyond reproach, and they've sat very pretty in international meetings and government offices. But now that we've started calling them out by name, people have started raising questions about it. And I mentioned in my previous answer to Linda about this webinar that's being hosted. The minister actually called me on the phone, which was quite a shock, and asked me to register and come and participate, because it seems he realizes that he might find himself maneuvered into a box if he doesn't have the sort of voice that is represented by what we do. So I think we are reaching those highest levels of attention, and we are providing an alternative way of looking at things. Because unbelievable, it's very hard to believe, but for so long, people in Kenya, government offices everywhere, everybody has seen that has been thinking there's no alternative to what has been going on for the last 100 years. It's terrible, but that's what people have been thinking, that we have to fence, we have to have guns, we have to have helicopters, we have to keep people out, and all those kind of things. But now we are seeing that many of these rangelands can be shared by people, their livestock and wildlife. And we also have to sell that as a tourism product, like the people are part of this landscape. and you cannot exclude them.
Good. Any other questions for Mordecai? Sophie.
There's been a lot of stuff recently in the press here saying because of tourism stopping, the wildlife and the safari tourism stopping, this is going to be a disaster for wildlife in Africa. It would be interesting to hear your response. I've seen some of it on Twitter, but it would be nice to hear more.
Yes, I was horrified by the report I saw on BBC News just this morning, saying just that. And the fact is this is a very concerted effort, I think, by these organizations. The international conservation NGOs spend a lot of money on engaging media and messaging. So I think they've really got an inside track into BBC, because BBC is saying exactly what they're saying. Sometimes I think they're on some same page as far as communicating the message is concerned. And the COVID-19 crisis, it's something of a silver lining, because it has exposed that myth that tourism protects wildlife. This has been a myth that has been repeated for decades and has become paradigm. But now the fact that tourism has basically crashed, everyone's been talking about this spike in poaching. New York Times, BBC, I think I saw something on Sky as well, and Washington Post. And the fact is the spike has not happened. The spike simply has not happened. It has not come. And as far as Kenya is concerned, and I'm sure other countries, the wildlife law enforcement patrols by KWS or TANAPA, whoever, are still going on with or without tourists. And the other thing is that the tourism industry always portrays themselves as giving money directly to conservation. The fact is, like in Kenya, the only money Kenya Wildlife Service gets from tourists is the little that they pay at the gate as the international park. The most famous safari destination in Kenya, Masai Mara Reserve, is not even in the hands of KWS. So they don't get a penny from there. So the law enforcement is paid for simply by government, taxpayers' money, and that is not influenced at all by tourism. So there's been no spike, and I think the ramping up of the reports on this is sort of a sign of sort of panic that suddenly our lie is being exposed, because tourism simply does not protect wildlife. Tourism is a business, and conservation is a principle. And we've suffered a lot because of our inability to separate the two. But now I think that that myth has been exposed for what it is, and so that is a bit of a silver lining from the crisis we go through now. There's been a lot of talk of the crisis, and the spike in poaching, but it's simply not happened. After all, I'm not sure where one would take wildlife trophies now. You can't travel, you can't export anything anywhere. So I'm not sure why wildlife crime would increase anywhere in the world. And the strange thing again is that these reports are all targeted to Africa. There's no talk of a spike in poaching in India or a spike in poaching in Brazil or South America or anywhere else. It's only about Africa. So it's I think it's the cries of a dying myth. I've enjoyed it, kind of.
Great. We've run out of time. Everybody's now putting up their hands, and there's no more time for any questions.
They're welcome to send them by email.
Yes, exactly. Good. Thank you very much, Mordecai.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you guys.
Okay, now you rather spoilt my ending, because I was going to point out that you say you live in Nanyuki, but in fact you don't. And this is a view taken from your veranda. This is what you see. This is what you see every morning. So us in lockdown in Paris and London can be very envious. But of course, the view's actually better than that, because if I get out of the way, you can see what's behind it. And that is the second highest mountain in Africa. Mount Kenya, higher than any mountain in Europe at 5,000 meters. And Mordecai lives in a very beautiful place.
It's a wonderful view to have every morning, yeah.
Thank
a good place to be locked down.
Thank you, Mordecai. Thank you, everybody.